floor, he's absolutely unstoppable. He can shoot from anywhere on the floor, and the only way you can guard him is getting him to put the ball on the floor and having a really elite defender there who can poke the ball away. He still turns the ball over more than you'd like. I mean, over the course of this postseason, Jason, he does average over 4 turnovers a game. But at the end of the day, Jason, he's just taking people's hearts out. He's ripping their hearts out of their chest. He did it to the Clippers to the tune of, what was it, 50 points. And then he just came back. He eviscerated the Rockets in game one. I mean, it's a Kevin Durant showcase.
Yeah, he's been otherworldly, as you said. Co-hero of the week here on Baseline Jumper. No, Kevin Durant, this is not a ploy to get you to sign in Brooklyn, but you've
Maybe
just
a
been
little bit.
playing at a really high level. I'd say without KD, the Warriors get knocked out by the Clippers in round one. No question about it. Now, I'm picking the Warriors to win this series in 7 because we have to stick with our original championship picks here. We both have Warriors Celtics in the finals, and it's looking that that possibility is still alive. However, Ben, I want to discuss with you why I think Houston has a legitimate chance to knock out the Warriors. You saw what happened in last year's series. Had Chris Paul not gone down, they would have been in the NBA Finals. I think they're going to employ that same recipe this year. And a lot of folks are saying that the Rockets got screwed by the refs in game one. Scott Foster, now, by the time this podcast is available, game two will be in the books. But Scott Foster is not really endeared to Houston Rockets Nation because every game he's reffed that the Rockets have played in, they've had a crushing loss. But however, if the Rockets can get past that, knock down threes, and continue to stifle any other Warrior not named KD, I mean, they have the recipe to take down Golden State better than any other team in the league. Do you agree with that?
Whew, man, I don't know. There's some teams out there. I think there's a few teams that can really guard the Warriors. I don't know, Jason. Is Klay Thompson healthy? Are we sure Klay Thompson's healthy? I'm a
Clay
little
looks
worried.
like he's got one foot out the door, to be honest with you. He just looks checked out mentally. He doesn't look like he's there. He's not hitting his spots. I don't know what's going on with Clay.
I mean, that's so. To your question, I don't know. I mean, I think the Celtics are probably the best equipped in the league to guard the Warriors because they can switch everything. And honestly, I almost feel like the Warriors don't gain much of an advantage by going small against a team like the Celtics. But then the other team that I think actually matches up really well with them, Jason, is the 76ers. And the reason I say that is that they really have no one who can guard Embiid, but the Sixers have a number of guys who can really guard guys like Durant. Like they have Ben Simmons, they have Jimmy Butler. The one problem for them is guarding Curry. They don't really have anyone who can guard Curry. So I don't know. I feel like there's actually, interestingly enough, this year, you almost see the Warrior effect. I don't know if you know what I mean, but when you look at the teams that are in the postseason right now, they look more like the Warriors. I mean, they have teams more like what the Warriors have done. They're more playmaking teams. They have a lot of wings. They're loaded up on wings, and then they kind of have, like this defensive switchable identity, with the exception, of course, of the Nuggets and the Blazers to some degree. Although I think even the Nuggets, you could say, have some proto Warrior DNA.
Wow, I really like the way you said that. I just felt like I was transported to Lord of the Rings. That was excellent. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it's a copycat league, so the Warriors were kind of at the forefront of this. But with so many teams kind of playing to their style, much like you saw the Heat be the catalyst for the Big Three era in the modern
Yeah.
NBA, but that's kind of starting to phase out because the league's catching up to what they're doing. That's why this is their last licks, and if they don't step their games up as a collective unit, Houston will move on in the series. That's why we both have Warriors in 7 because this could really go either way.
And I think the X factor here is going to be the health of Klay Thompson. If Klay Thompson can't play his game, it is going to be a big problem for the Warriors because they're going to need Durant and Curry to go absolutely nuts, especially without Cousins. The scoring burden is going to be a lot more. Draymond Green is not going to light it up. He had a really good game one, and he looked ready to play against the Rockets. We'll see what happens in game two. I mean, the funny thing, Jason, is we're talking about all this, And we're saying all these things, but I mean, anything could happen. If game two, if the Warriors just take game two in a romp, all of a sudden they're up 2-0, and then you're thinking, wow, this could be a quicker series than we thought. So a lot to be seen, I think, in game two. I'm really kind of moving over to the series that already had their second game, Jason, which was the Sixers versus the Raptors. And I think you felt like the Raptors looked the part of the dominant team.
Well, I wrote that before game two, and I watched most of game two on Monday night. But I just love Brett Brown's quote on Jimmy Butler, calling him the adult in the room. I don't know if you read that,
Yeah.
but without Jimmy Butler, the Sixers would be lost. I mean, you saw him in the series against
Oh my
Brooklyn.
gosh.
He shined more than any other Sixer not named Joel Embiid. And on a night where Embiid had food poisoning, it seems like this guy is always not feeling well, by
Right?
the way. But Butler came out and just dominated Toronto, and it got close. I mean, the Raptors made a run in the fourth quarter. Kyle Lowry hit a couple threes in a row, and they just didn't make the plays in the end. But now the Sixers go home with home court, but I don't think they're good enough to beat the Toronto Raptors. They don't have the bench depth that Toronto has. I think Nurse is a bit of a savvier head coach than Brett Brown is. And in game one, much like against the Nets, the Sixers looked overmatched, and then they're good at making adjustments, and they're going to make this a series. However, game three is going to be a huge tipping point, and I think the series will go to the winner of game three. Look for Toronto to come out fast in game three on the road in Philadelphia, and we'll see if the Sixers have the guys to keep up both health-wise and personnel-wise.
Well, I'm very interested. I actually think this is the most interesting series of the second round, Jason. And the reason I say that is that I feel like you're watching two teams that are going about this in a very different way, and there is so much at stake, Jason. I think whichever one of these teams wins is going to be my favorite to make the finals, and whichever team loses is likely going to lose one of their best players in free agency. I really think the stakes are that high. I think if the Sixers lose, they're going to end up having to kind of discard either Butler or Harris in free agency. Meanwhile, I think if the Raptors lose, before they even make the conference finals, Kawhi Leonard's gone. I think he is out the door. And
Well, you could
that's
say that about either series, really. You know, this was the Eastern Conference semifinal matchups that people wanted because all four of these teams, two of them have to lose, and all four have a big free agent situations coming their way this summer. So that's why the stakes are so high. For sure, I agree with you completely.
yeah, I mean, I feel like with Irving, the funny thing with Irving is I almost feel like with him, we've already seen it. Like they could win the finals and he might still leave. I mean, he already did that one time. He won the finals with the Cavs and he still decided to get out of there. So it's hard to say to me that like Irving winning is going to keep him there. It feels like he's just going to kind of do whatever he wants to do. Whereas I genuinely do feel, Butler, it feels like he's a guy who just can't stand losing. I mean, for better or for worse, he doesn't always react to it well, but it really felt like he part of the reason he left Minnesota was he couldn't stand the way that some of his teammates played and he just wanted to be on a winning team. And I do feel like if they lose in the semifinals, I could really see him decide to move. And then meanwhile, Leonard, there's just so many suitors for him. There's so many teams that would be happy to take him. We mentioned the Nets, obviously the Clippers, the Lakers would be happy to do whatever they could do to get him. So I think that makes this series compelling. And then there's just the fact that, Jason, the amount of talent in this series is really incredible. I think when you really look at the Raptors, they're one of the most well-built teams. And on paper, I'm not sure there's a better team in the East actually this year than the Toronto Raptors. They have an absolute superstar. They have a budding star in Siakam. They have one of the best two-way big men in Gasol who can also stretch out to the three. They have Lowry, who's a very savvy point guard, and then they have the perfect complement, the perfect last starter in Danny Green, who can really defend, one of the best transition defenders in the NBA, and a really solid half-court defender who also knocks down shots. And then on the other hand, you have the Sixers, who are just an overwhelming avalanche of talent. And it kind of poses the question of talent versus fit and starters versus depth. And you mentioned it too. The coaches both have had their ups and downs. Obviously, Brett Brown has been a little bit beleaguered this season, whereas Nick Nurse, this is his first year, and he's now having to make all these adjustments on the fly. So I am fascinated, Jason, and if I can, I'm going to try to avoid missing a single game in this series.
Listen, are you planning on going to any of these games? Because you are a well-traveled NBA fan this season. You've been to Detroit, you've been
Ooh,
to
maybe I have to go to
Atlanta, you've
Toronto.
been to Chicago. When are you going to come to a Brooklyn game with me, buddy?
Oh, you know next season we're doing that. I'll be in Philly this weekend actually for a bachelor party. Maybe I'll have to find a way to make my way to a game.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea, Ben. I need you intact for next week's show.
Yeah, I'm excited though. I mean, I think it's going to be just an incredible series. Maybe I can go to that 3:30 game on Sunday. Who knows?
Well, we'll see how functioning you are after you stay up all night in the library at Independence Hall, okay?
Well, Jason, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the last game on our slate. And right now, or excuse me, last series, the Celtics are playing the Bucks, and the Bucks are up pretty big going into this fourth quarter. And it's kind of an interesting series as well because the Celtics kind of I don't know what analogy you want to use here, but the Celtics handled the Bucks in Game One. I mean, there's no two ways about it. They looked just like the better team in that game, and I think a lot of people, including myself, it really made us reconsider our pick for the Bucks. What was your takeaway?
Well, first of all, I'm giving the Bucks my zero of the week because they're better than that, and they took the Celtics way too lightly in Game One. I'm not going to get too deep on that because the Bucks are up 30 right now, and the series is going to be tied 1-1. However, I'm going to give the Celtics props. They swept Indiana, and they had a nice Game One victory where the league was like, maybe the Celtics are coming together at the right time. And I think it's because of two reasons. Gordon Hayward is fully bought into his role as that player off the bench, that spark plug. He's getting healthier and healthier. Obviously, he's almost 2 years removed from that devastating injury. And then you have the X factor in Al Horford. And this is the one series where the two centers are kind of those old school NBA bigs who can step out and shoot. You have Brook Lopez with Milwaukee and Al Horford with Boston. And I think it's nice to see them kind of guarding each other and getting up and down the floor. But Horford is the X factor. Everyone knows Lopez is a bit of a liability defensively. He doesn't rebound well. And Horford is one of those shifty centers who can crash the boards and step back and shoot the jumper from the baseline. Hey. But
Hey,
no, I just think the Celtics coming together at the right time was nice to see, but they were smacked down to earth hard tonight by the Bucks for sure.
I mean, I think you know what it comes down to, Jason. I just think it's going to come down to Kyrie Irving. He had a really bad game tonight, and it really is a serious. I mean, everyone was talking about Al Horford. Al Horford played great. I'm not taking anything away from Al Horford, but the bottom line is there's a weak link on this team for the Bucks, Jason, and that is their big men. Their big men are not guys who are capable of playing out in space. What that means for the Celtics is they have a weak point that they can attack. They put Mirotic, they put Lopez, and they just put them in pick and rolls over and over again. And they keep running them through the pick and rolls. And that's what we saw game one. And if Kyrie Irving is on and he's playing good basketball, Jason, he can torture those guys. He can absolutely torture them. And unless they go under the screens with whoever's guarding him, in most cases I'm assuming that'll be Bledsoe, um, you know, that's the only way you're going to be able to do it without switching. And then you're giving him that shot. If he hits those shots, you're going to have to start going over or switching. And in either case, you're either opening up lanes for everyone else on the team, or B, you're going to be giving him the opportunity to just go one-on-one against a guy who can't stay in front of him. And so it's going to really come down to that matchup. And, you know, we look at the game tonight, and if you really want to see why the Celtics are getting absolutely creamed, a big part of it is that Irving's having one of his worst games of the entire season, Jason. He is 4 for 18, and he didn't make a shot for a large chunk of the game. It was not until partway through the second quarter that he had his first shot. And that just, they're not going to win games if that's the case. I would say, though, Jason, one thing to really look out for in this series, Coach Budenholzer has not played his star players a lot of minutes. Giannis did not play big minutes game one. He didn't play much against the
He,
Pistons. I mean, obviously he didn't have to play much against the Pistons.